Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. Big treat today on the program. We have Gino Barbaro. He's the co-founder of Jake and Gino and Barbaro 360. Gino is an investor. He's a certified money coach. He's an entrepreneur. He's a podcast host himself. And he's grown a real estate portfolio to nearly $500 million in assets. So he's certainly got all the credibility everyone needs to run his businesses. Gino's a best-selling author as well of Happy Money, Happy Family, Happy Legacy. It's a pretty happy title. I love that. He resides in St. Augustine, Florida, with his wife and kids. Gino, welcome to the program.
Wayne, thanks. I want to give you a big shout out. And this may be the first leadership lesson that we throw on the podcast. We had a pre-call, and you could have said, where's this effing Gino guy? He's 15 minutes late. I'm going to get the hell out of here. But Wayne didn't do that. Wayne waited. And literally, that was one of the funnest, pre-calls we did. I got to know you, got to see how illustrious your career was. And I guess the lesson of that story is you just never know. Just wait. Give a few minutes. And that's what you ended up doing. And we had a great conversation, and it's led to this recording, led to this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm so glad that we stuck it out. I think what happened is I forgot. I'm not going to give myself too much credit. I just kind of kept the Zoom open, and then I was working on emails, and I got caught up in that. So don't praise me too highly. But it was a great experience to get to know you a little bit, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion as well. So tell me a little bit about Barbaro 360, what your mission is there, what you're doing. I'm sure the audience would love to hear.
Well, Wayne, we zoom out. Barbaro 360 became from the company that I used to run, which was called Jake and Gino. We started an education company, my business partner, Jake, and myself, to teach people how to buy real estate, multifamily. It was a lot of fun. It's great. But after a while, I started seeing some people struggling buying deals, and there were others that had no business buying a deal. They were young, they had no experience, they had no money. They're closing deals. But these people over here that have all the looks, they have all the experience, they've got all the balance sheet, they're not doing it. And that was a struggle for me. I wanted to understand why. So I fell into this world of money coaching, financial therapy, and I was like, wow, a person's behaviors, patterns, and beliefs really affects what's going on today and the way they look at investing. And I just got hooked, Wayne. I said, I want to learn more about this. When I went to become a money coach, and then from there, I've got 6 children. I'm like, I want to teach my children to become entrepreneurs. I want to teach them all about financial legacy. I want to teach them about the stewardship. What better way than to start a company with your family to teach other families about faith, family, finances, health and wellness, and wrap it up and start to have the conversation around money with your children. And I think ultimately what I truly believe is families with financial intelligence can change the world for the better. And that's what I think what our mission at Barbaro 360 is, really to empower our parents to have that conversation with kids and with other family members so they can continue that experience around money.
That's a beautiful thing, and it's a great mission, and one that's needed. When you and I spoke previously, it's really evident that we don't have this kind of education through the education system that our children go through, and it has to come from somewhere else. And sometimes, for a lot of parents, they're not really well equipped to teach their kids about money because they had bad ideas about money. And in my coaching work, what I find as well, is that sometimes people have a bad relationship with the idea of money. They misquote the scripture that says the love of money is the fruit of all evil. And they think money is the root of all evil, So then they think, okay, maybe that's a problem. Or they have a limiting belief like, if I'm successful, someone else has to be unsuccessful, right? But no, the pie gets bigger. You don't take it from someone else. So I think there's just some principles about money at a very fundamental level that if we could teach the kids and teach the families like you're doing, it's just going to be a better world for everybody. So I really applaud what you're doing. So what's the end goal with this? How are you going to reach the most people possible through your companies and through this effort?
Well, hopefully through the podcasts, we have a couple of podcasts. I'm actually doing a show with my son. He's 23 years old. It's called the
Yeah,
Happy Money Podcast. And when I first started out, I didn't think of it as a legacy podcast. I'm literally doing this show with my son about money. And in the next
right.
10 to 15 years, I'm hoping he has kids. So how
Yeah,
cool would it be for my grandchildren to learn about money from their grandfather and from their son, just having a conversation about it? That to me is how I want to really reach the whole medium is by podcasting, by writing
right.
articles, by doing workshops. And when I started thinking about it, I was like, this is the way just to have conversations and to show people that I personally think that everyone on this planet is winging it and we're figuring it out. Even those of us that are super wealthy and we all look great on the outside, on the inside, we still have a lot of work to do. So for me, that's the challenge is to try to be authentic, try to be transparent, try to show people that I've made mistakes and that I will always be on this journey. Because I think once you
Right.
stop the journey, whether it's for personal growth, whether it's trying to become better as a human, once you stop it, it's almost like you're dying when you do that. So for me, just to continue as far as books, as far as readings, as far as going back to college, I'm actually taking a college course right now called financial therapy because I want to become a better at understanding the therapy model around money and being able to ask people great questions, being able to make them understand what that relationship looks like. And it's a really personal thing for everybody. So for me, that's how I think we're going to reach as many people as possible, getting out there, doing podcasts, being on other people's shows, and having that difficult conversation.
That's great. I mean, the world definitely needs some guides on this journey, and
Yes.
I think it's a beautiful thing that you and your son are doing that. And what's emerging right now, of course, with artificial intelligence is we have probably the best educational opportunity ever for everyone to be able to reach into some really high quality instruction. And if you have your company working with those tools to guide the direction and the sequencing and the emotional pieces of it too, because as I mentioned earlier, there's an emotional attachment to money sometimes that can be problematic. And then every time you go into a different sector, let's talk about real estate for a second because you're in real estate. I know when I've taken real estate classes or I've talked to real estate investors, and I've been around the business world for 50 plus years and doing some pretty, running some big businesses, small businesses, and pretty engaged in a lot of different stuff. But I got into that arena. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know. I mean, a lot of stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, well, wait a second. How do you use money in this way? And maybe the
Mhm.
right kind of debt is like it is in business is not so bad in real estate. And how do you put yourself in a position where you can advantage and layer investments on top of each other? A lot of complexity there. Talk to me about how you teach real estate investing to help, your constituents.
It's interesting that you say that. When you get into real estate, for me, when I got in, I had the limiting belief of it takes money to make money. Money
Hmm.
doesn't grow on trees. That was my preconditioning. Those were my behaviors and my patterns growing up as a child. When you get into real estate, you look at these buildings and you say, well, I can't afford that building. Where am I going to get that money from the building? And you probably know this probably better than anybody else. It's not the lack of money. It's the lack of value and the lack of understanding to get the deal closed. You may need money in real estate, but does it have to be your money? I mean, has anybody ever heard of the term syndication? A syndication is really just a pooling of investors' capital. Now, you're
Right.
not going to be able to get a syndication done if it's your first deal and you have no value. But if you've done a few deals and you've got some experience and you've got a great business plan and you have this opportunity here to buy this asset, well, do you think you can raise some capital for that? Yes. The old Gino would say, well, where am I going to find the money? I don't have the money. I mean, the newer version of myself is okay, I've got this understanding. I've got this way to be able to present this opportunity. I'm not raising money. I'm not asking Wayne for money. I'm offering Wayne an opportunity. And I think that's one of the things that people get stuck up on
Yeah.
with real estate. And the other strategy that we talk about is seller financing, when you're using the seller to finance part of the sale. Are you
Yeah.
getting money or are you using money? Well, technically you are, but you're using the seller's equity to buy this. So if you go into the business with that closed minded, with that single paradigm of I need money, no, you don't need money in business. You need to be able to provide value, to be able to understand where there's value, how you can extract that value, and don't focus on just the money aspect of it. Because if you can provide a tremendous amount of value and you can make other people money, you will have that money come to you in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I was just smiling because it wasn't in the real estate arena, but just over the weekend I was writing up a value proposition of the strategic business plan in another sector. And it was exactly that, just taking the value that's there and making sure everybody can win in a solution that you're just pulling together because you know how to do it. So really, really good insight there. So one
Wayne,
of the big,
isn't it interesting though? I mean, this is the biggest mistake that I made in business early on, and I think most entrepreneurs make this mistake is they start a business to feed themselves or to feed their family. And that's what I did early on when I opened my restaurant. Fortunately, I was lucky because back then, 30 plus years ago, there was not as much competition. Eating habits were different, and I was able to provide a good value for the customer. But if I had really leaned into, man, I'm going to start this restaurant because I'm passionate about food, because I love this community here, and because I just want to provide a great experience from that person coming home from New York City on the train. They come home, they pick up their meal at the restaurant and go home. If I had been so centrically focused on providing a solution for my client and providing value for the customer, I would have had 20 restaurants by now. And then from there, not
yeah,
only the customer, worry about your employee next. That's what
yeah,
most of us don't do. We think about ourselves first, extracting the most amount of value for ourselves, and then whatever's left over goes to the customer and goes to the employee. But if we are able to be financially intelligent and emotionally intelligent to understand that you're starting a business, you're working for an employee, whatever employer, you need to provide value for that other side first. And if you can solve a problem, provide value, buy that building and make a return for your investor, same kind of thing. You're going to be able to raise a ton of money. If you can take that mindset, man, you can have an amazing business. And that's the mistake that I made early on, was all about
yeah.
me and about my family starting that business.
Yeah, and you know it's an age-old piece of philosophy that you're hitting on, and you're hitting it right in the center. And that
Hmm.
is that the law of reciprocity is somehow built
Hmm.
into our lives and into our world. So when you create value for other people, that value comes back to you
It
multiplied.
does.
You don't really need to worry about that part because you're creating value for the others. You mentioned your customers and your employees. I love
Hmm.
that. We've had a number of examples on this program and the leadership lessons that we're working on that shows how servant leaders by serving others create tremendous legacies for themselves and great business results. So I'm glad you shared that. Going forward here, what do you think the big hurdles will be that you'll have to overcome? I mean, we talked about maybe AI being an accelerator, a force multiplier for the work that you're doing. Are there any challenges or headwinds that you think are lying ahead?
For us in the real estate space, it does come down to interest rates. Interest rates have been stubbornly high. I think sellers have been still stuck in 21, 22 pricing. I mean, they don't understand that their pricing has got to be down 20% less. And it's interesting in real estate, if there's not a motivated seller, you will not get a deal. That's just the
Right,
reality.
right,
And people are trying
right,
to force it. So if you don't have a motivated seller and you're trying to, what does they say, put a square in a peg a peg, whatever that terminology is, you can't force it. So for us, the
right.
headwinds are it's so interesting, Wayne. I'm trying to parse out the data and try to make sense of the data. They said that payrolls increased by 179,000 in March. I just don't understand where these numbers are coming from. I don't have trust in these numbers because it doesn't feel as if that's the case. I'm worried
Right.
about AI displacing a lot of these, blue collar workers in
Yeah.
fast food and that tech. That may hurt our industry of multifamily because we have
Mhm.
renters and these renters have
Right.
those jobs. Fortunately for us, we're in a part of the country where we have population growth. We're in Tennessee. We have a
Mhm.
lot of our assets in
Okay.
Knoxville, Tennessee, and the same in
Right.
Florida. So we have the demographics coming our way, but we need to be wary of that. So for us, for headwinds,
Yeah.
for us, it comes down to AI replacing jobs, and it comes down to the economy. I think we need to get rates dropped. I think we need to have more affordability. It's very interesting. One last thing I'd say about this is
Yeah.
when you're
Sure.
looking at renting versus owning, the delta between the two has never been higher, I think, in history. It's like $1,000 less per month to rent on average than it is to
Mhm.
buy a home. So that's very difficult for people trying to buy their first home. Why would
Yeah.
they buy a home when they can rent? And it comes down to the affordability and the ability to build more homes. That's what we need
Yeah.
to look for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said. Well, the good news is that the government's debt situation really requires lower interest rates are going to put themselves out of business. So maybe the trend will start moving in the right direction.
Yes.
The one thing
Yeah.
you said that I really like though is that sellers are stuck in the 21, 22 mindset, the
Hmm.
post-COVID mindset where things were just unusually high.
Hmm.
And now they need to be more realistic. And it seems to me that what we're seeing, even in Florida, where the markets are hot, like the places we live, you and I, what we're seeing is prices are moderating a little bit because of the inventory in the marketplace. So we'll see where that goes. So I appreciate, yeah, you sharing it. So in this program, Gino, we look for the leadership lessons inside the real life stories of key executives like yourself. So tell us a story, set it up for us, let us understand it. Could be in the present, the past, whatever. And then let's see if we can find a couple leadership lessons for the audience in it.
It's interesting. I was just on a podcast last week with a woman, and she said to me, connection before correction. And I was like,
Hmm.
wow, I love that. And it's taken a long time for me to apply that to my children. I'm very good at working with employees and having empathy and having patience with employees, but at times with children, it's a lot more difficult. And one story, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because I wish I had connected before I had corrected my child. My daughter, Veronica, about 3 years ago, is in the kitchen. She's sitting there, she's making meatballs. Now, Wayne, I'm the meatball king. I've made probably 200,000 meatballs in my life. That's all I did for 20 years. And I'm the
Yeah.
king meatball maker. And for that day, I must have been having a bad day, but I came into the kitchen and I said, Veronica, you're doing them wrong. You need to use a scooper, ice cream scooper. You need to make them 3 ounces. You need blah, blah, blah. And I was got into a big argument with her. And
Yeah.
I just wish, and we started screaming at each other. The good news was an hour later, I realized how much of an ass I was. And I went back and I apologized to her. I said, listen, profusely, I said, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I had something going on that day. I was really frustrated. I took it out on you. You may be listening to this and saying, what does that have to do with leadership? And to me, it has everything to do with leadership as a father and as a leader, even of a company. I mean, do you treat your employees that way? I mean, if you do, you're not going to have very many employees or you're not going to have many problems solved. So for me, if I had just gone to her and I said, hey, Rons, this is how I do it, and connected with her before trying to correct her. And even more importantly, she's great at making meatballs. Does she have to do them my way? I was conditioned by my father because I had to do everything his way, old school Italian guy. And that was probably a bad habit. Now that I reflect back on that, do we have to do things our way? Give our children the grace to do it their way. Let them make the mistakes. They'll learn through those mistakes. Don't be such a tyrant sometimes. But I think the big lesson, really, as I wrote it down, is you need to, I think, connect with somebody before you correct somebody. Have that connection before you go out there and try to solve the problem.
As an executive coach, we get into this exact issue quite a bit, and there's a
Ah,
couple of
I can
levels of
imagine.
insight that come out of it. The first one is through the connection. It's really even more than that. If you're going to be a leader, you not only need to connect with them, personally on
Yes.
some sort of, meaningful, mutual human level, but if you're going to be the leader, the people need to respect you and even admire you to the extent that they need to be there. And that takes an even longer journey of connection with them, right?
Hmm.
Demonstrating that you're the kind of person they want to be. And I'm sure your daughter feels that about you in many ways,
Hmm.
but she didn't want to be the person who was forcing someone to do it the other way, right?
Yes.
So I think as leaders, we need to build a portfolio of behaviors that include honesty and forthrightness and trust. And we have to have a shared vision. We have to not show any chinks in the armor relative to our belief system and the way we execute and consistency over time and all of these things that we work on in our coaching sessions. And so connection is a good way to summarize that. And I really like that. And you've done that on many levels, but the other thing we focus on is we all have a number of bad programs, behaviors, mindsets that we picked up along the way. Some of them we picked up from our parents, some of them we picked up from the street, sometimes we picked it up from a teacher or clergyman, and sometimes we picked it up from movies or other things. I mean, who knows where we
Hmm.
get some of these behaviors? And some are great. Some of them make us the person we are, but some of them are not so great. And I use road rage as an example all the time. I'm not going to repeat the whole story here on this because I've done it before in the podcast. But and my audience is going to start throwing eggs at it. But the reality is, I had some really bad road rage kind of mindsets. It's like, why in the world would you have this kind of
Hmm.
angry, spiteful, vengeance oriented mindset when I'm not that kind of person. You get
Yes.
in a vehicle and all of a sudden your whole, demeanor changes. So I wanted to rid myself of that program. So what we do is we say, all right, how do we design a better program? And
Mm-hmm.
you did just that in your story. You
Mm-hmm.
stepped away, you got a broader kind of perspective. You realized how much you love your daughter and how you were self-reflective. You made a mistake. You designed a better program in your mind. And then you went back and executed it. You told
Mm-hmm.
her how great she is at making meatballs. You told her how sorry you were. You told her that you honor her and her ingenuity and her uniqueness as a part of that experience. And so that was
Mm-hmm.
a tremendous thing. And then the third part about that story that also has a great leadership lesson, I think, is delegation, right? So in a
Yes.
way, the fact that you didn't have your butt in the kitchen making the meatballs that day,
I should have been
she was,
happy.
yeah, she was delegated to do it. She was doing it of her own accord, but
Yes.
basically you needed to be the person delegating to
Mm-hmm.
someone else because you didn't have the time or the energy. You weren't doing it anyway.
Yeah.
So in business, sometimes you need to realize that, we all come up through, silos of expertise. Maybe one person's an engineer, maybe one person's a marketer, but then they get into a position of general management. And if you're an engineer and you're delegating an engineering task and that young person doesn't have the insight, the experience, the proven track record that you have, they're not going to do it the same way. They might not even do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're delegating, you need to communicate. You need to make sure they have the resources they need. And then you need to coach. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need to correct, right? So I like
Mm-hmm.
this connection before correction. Maybe we'll make that the title of this podcast and everyone will remember kind of how that connects to all the
Yeah.
areas we're talking about. But I love that story, as simple as it was, and thanks for sharing it. Any other insights from that or based on the things that struck me?
Well, as you're talking, I want to zoom out for a second because what I heard from you is pride and ego is really one of the killers of
Mhm.
leadership and business. And if we,
Yes.
pull it in right now, I had a little pride there. I had a little bit of an ego. I was saying, I can do it better than you. I'm smarter than you. And maybe that's the case, but that does lead to blindness. I mean,
Right.
it's just incredible when you think about it, when you get yourself into the ego and you always need to be right and you're always the smartest person, you're not there as a leader to actually listen to other people's input.
Yeah.
When you're a leader, you should be out there saying, okay, there's problems, team. Okay, I don't want just the problem. Bring me two or three solutions to that problem. And as the leader, you don't really need to or take credit or want to take credit. That's the pride or the ego in you. So it'd be great if you could just suspend that and it's really hard to do. It's very difficult to
Yes.
do because we're humans. It's all about us. We always want to be
Right.
right. We always want to look good. But if you truly want to lead, it's you should put yourself in the background and you highlight the team, you highlight their accomplishments, and you make sure that your pride or your ego does not get in the way of
Yeah.
your thought process and cloud it.
Yeah. I love the quote from, I believe it's from Paulo Coelho, the Brazilian
Mm,
author, who said the ego is the thousand-headed dragon we have to slay every day. And we
hmm
all have to slay it all the
hmm
time. And, sometimes we work on the ego when we're working on anger and frustration for
Yes.
leaders. It's connected to patience and a lot of other aspects. But when you get angry, I would ask you to answer this question before you take any action on your anger. Is this really an issue that Wayne should be concerned about that is justifiably requires some anger to really solve this problem? And rarely that's the case. But 99% of the time it's just Wayne's the legal getting bruised, right?
hmm
And
hmm
I'm kind of getting into a childlike behavior where I want to pout or I want to be angry, or I want to use anger to make a point to make someone else feel that I'm hurt, right? And
hmm
that is so petty. It's so beneath us if you really think about it and look at it that way. And that's why
hmm
I'd like to express it that way. So very insightful that you have that perspective as well. And if you're going to be a servant leader, you need to be humble and realize, like my mama told me, everybody puts their pants on the same way. So I don't
Yeah.
think of anyone as better than me, but I don't think of anyone as lesser either.
hmm hmm
Um, One time I went into it was a consulting assignment, and on my first day, it was a multi-billion dollar company, big company, and I was coming in to take a senior role as a fractional C-suite executive in the company for a period of time. And I just decided the first day, nobody knew me from Adam, right? And I'm walking in their headquarters in another state, another location. And I just decided to watch. I got there early and I sat as if I was a guest waiting to see someone before I went up to the office. And I just watched the people. I said, and I was trying to pay attention who did what. I didn't know their names. I just knew their faces. And I was seeing which one said hello to the security guards and spent time interacting.
Oh.
Which one said hello to the woman who was mopping the showroom floor, right? And so I was just kind of watching the behaviors. And I did that for a couple of days before, because I met a few people, but not everyone knew me, right? And it gave me a really good insight into where the people were that I was going to
Mhm.
be working with, right? And
Mhm.
I think we can do that, with ourselves. Pay attention to make sure that you yourself don't walk by people and think that they're insignificant.
Mhm.
I think, well, I'm a follower of Christ, so I just believe the Lord told us to love everybody, not just some people. He even told us to love our enemies.
Mhm.
So, we need to make sure that we look at everyone else as a child of God in my book. And if you do that as a leader, it's such a multiplying advantage for you
Mhm.
to really have that part of your demeanor and your style already kind of well in hand. Anyway, um, I don't know how you feel about that, but it sounds like you're right on with that
Well,
kind of
you're
thought.
creating a culture, Wayne, within the organization that's not just written on the wall, right? That's if that's the kind of company that you want to create, and I agree with you. I love that. I love that kind of ideal, and that's what we're trying to create with Barbell 360. It's like you want that culture. You want it to emanate throughout my family, but I would love for that kind of culture to spread throughout, and
Sure.
that's what I think leaders do. They don't just say but they do it by their actions as well. Because you've heard the old slogan, "Actions speak louder than words." Words are great, but once you start behaving in that certain way, behaviors are belief driven. Once you start behaving in that fashion, it becomes contagious, and people really resonate with that. They love to be heard. They love to be seen, and they love to know, as Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. If you can do that, you're doing that. You're trying to understand
Yeah.
where other people are. That's what I think leadership really is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Deeds, not words, for sure. I had a
Hmm.
great leader that I was associated with in the past that used that. All right. Well, I think there's great leadership lessons there. It was great that we explored those things. Let's, as we start to wrap up our conversation, let's talk about what advice you would give your younger self if you could rewind 25, 30 years and you know what you know now. What one thing would you emphasize with your younger self that would be important in your life?
Wow. I really enjoy and really like where I am right now. So I don't want to really jinx myself. So I don't really want to change anything. But if I had to change one thing, it would be not to worry about money so much. I mean, for
Hmm.
me, I've got 6 children. I was always worried about making more money. And I
Hmm.
wish I had been on this journey sooner of personal development. Really getting into the coaching world. I was in my mid 30s when I maybe 32 or 33 when I fell in love with Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Tony
Hmm.
Robbins. I wish I had started that earlier. I wish I had started that like right out of my college years instead of just focusing on going to corporate. I would have loved to have done that. So anybody listening to this, really, it's your inputs, whatever you put into your mind and your
Hmm.
soul every day. Sooner or later, I mean that's what's going to start emanating out forth. So if I had to pick one thing, I really wish I had gotten into personal development and coaching. 30 years ago, Wayne, it wasn't as prevalent. And to me, life
No,
coaching
not at all.
completely changed my life. I was able to ask empowering questions. I became a much better listener. I knew how to really set great goals. I had
Hmm.
objectives. It was like a roadmap for my life. And I just
Yeah.
wish I had done that sooner.
Yeah, and in fairness to you, it wasn't in vogue at that point in time. Whereas now, I mean, we see whatever field it's in, the best people in the world at whatever their activity is. Whether you're a professional PGA golfer, you have a swing coach. Why
Hmm.
would the best players in the world need a swing coach, right? Or if you're a senior executive running major corporations, they have executive coaches, right?
Hmm.
And so we I think have a different mindset toward it, but that would be great advice to have a different relationship with money and get some coaching around that because it didn't come
Hmm.
naturally. All right, let's fast forward the other direction. Let's go 20 years into the future. You and I are watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee on the beach there in St. Augustine, and you're telling me about your life and your career. What are you going to tell me you're most proud of?
Oh, that's an easy question. For me, the thing that sticks out is having a relationship with my kids and obviously my wife, but having my kids just be around and having my kids just just love me and saying, "Hey, let's go see Grandpa." That is the thing that we've been
Yeah,
building for the last 20 years. The things that I've sacrificed. We've
yeah,
sacrificed a lot as parents. Not being
yeah,
able to go play golf every weekend, not being able to go out hang out at the bars, not being able to watch football on Sundays. I've sacrificed a lot of that to spend time with the children and to do things with them.
yeah.
So for me, 20 years from now, if I could sit there and say to you, yeah, I would love to have just a great relationship with my kids and have them come to me for whatever they want, and also to be attuned with what the legacy that we're trying to create with the children. So, whatever we're leaving on, whether it's the financial aspect of it, or the values that we have, or the family leadership, looking back and
Yeah.
going, yeah, they've got it. They know exactly what they're doing. We're not going shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. We're going to be able to continue to perpetuate that. That would probably be part of it as well.
Well, that's certainly an honorable response. And I would say, I don't think you have to worry about that because I think you're not only doing it and living it, but you're actually teaching them, as you say, how to give that to other people.
Mhm.
Your book about family and, how to manage the family's assets so that everybody comes together and has a happy life.
Mhm.
What a beautiful thing you're doing, Gino. I really give you great, great credit for that.
Thanks, Wayne.
So, if the audience wanted to get in touch with you or follow up and maybe get the benefit of some of this coaching and development work that you do, how would they get in touch with you?
The simplest way, if this resonates with you, if you've got a family and you want to continue your legacy or you haven't started, it's never too late. It's not something we leave behind, legacy. It's something that we activate today. So to me, it's never too late. Just go out to barbaro360.com. You can download our PDF copy of our book for free. You can schedule a call with one of our team members. I'd just love to have the conversation. I love talking about money. I love talking about investing. I love talking about creating a family. I love talking about legacy. So if that resonates with you, just go to barbaro360.com.
That's great. All right, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us today, Gino. It's been a true pleasure. I hope you and I will stay in touch as things go forward. Maybe we'll revisit this conversation at some point in the future. But all the
Wait,
best.
Wayne, I got to say, that was the quickest 30 minutes of my life, brother. That flew by. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Yeah, it went by quickly for me as well. Hopefully the audience will capture all of the great pearls that you shared with us. All right, but thanks and all the best to you and God bless.
Thanks, Wayne.
Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember the high road leads to a better place.